He didn't want trouble, just a look at an old rifle he used to carry long before most of them were even born. But the clerk laughed at his questions, mocked his limp, called him grandpa, and told him to leave. The old man didn't argue. He left quietly like he always had, one step at a time. What the clerk didn't know was that the name on that man's dog tag still meant something. And exactly 1 hour later, an entire Navy SEAL team pulled into the parking lot. No sirens, no warnings, just a dozen men walking in formation, dead silent and asking one question: where is he? Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of disrespect, loyalty, and redemption, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this video today? And if you believe real warriors never forget their own, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. The gun shop sat on the edge of town, nestled between a bait store and a hardware warehouse. Its windows tinted just enough to give the illusion of authority. Inside, racks of rifles lined the walls like trophies, and glass counters displayed handguns too polished to look real. Behind the register, 2 young clerks leaned over their phones, half paying attention to the soft hum of country music playing from the ceiling speaker. The place wasn't busy, but it never needed to be. This was the kind of store that made its money on image. At exactly 10:43 a.m., the front door chimed. The man who entered didn't command attention. He simply existed in a way that made everything a little quieter. Worn boots, jeans that had been patched at the knee, a brown leather jacket older than half the staff. His face was weathered but calm, eyes sharp under the brim of a faded Navy SEAL cap. He moved slowly but with purpose, his limp noticeable but never pitiful. He didn't glance around. He walked straight to the counter, rested his hand gently on the glass, and waited. One of the clerks looked up, gave a forced smile. "Need something, sir?" The old man nodded once. "Yeah. Wondering if you still carry the M1 Grand replica from the back wall, the real stock model." The kid blinked. That's a collector's piece. Not something you'd want to fire." "I didn't ask to fire it," the man said, voice even. "Just wanted to hold it for a moment. Haven't touched one in decades." The second clerk, a little older, stepped in with a chuckle. "That rifle's heavier than it looks, Pops. Might be a bit much for your back." The old man didn't smile. He just said, "I used to carry one across jungles. I can manage it across a showroom." That was when the tone changed. The first kid laughed too loud. "Okay, Rambo. Unless you're buying, you're just taking up space. Let the real customers in." The second added, "Yeah, we're not a museum." The old man paused. For a second, it looked like he was going to say something, maybe correct them, maybe remind them who he was. But instead he looked down at the counter, nodded to himself, and simply said, "Understood." Then he turned around, walked to the door, and left. No protest, no anger, no demand to speak to the owner. Just one man alone again, walking slowly back toward the edge of a country that had forgotten what some men gave for it. Inside, the clerks went back to scrolling their phones. Neither of them noticed the woman by the ammo rack. Mid-1930s gym shirt, ball cap pulled low, watching the scene in silence. Nor did they notice her step outside 2 minutes later, pull a phone from her pocket, and make one single call. He said 3 words. He was there. At 11:43 a.m. The parking lot in front of the gun shop began to fill, but not with customers. A matte black SUV pulled in and parked close to the entrance. The engine stayed on. A minute later, another parked beside it. Then a third. No music, no movement, just quiet, humming machines with dark glass and tinted intentions. Inside the store, the clerks were still joking, still scrolling through their phones, still unaware that the atmosphere outside was shifting. Then the doors opened, 3 at once, and 12 men stepped out. Their movements were deliberate, unhurried, but carried a weight that made people stop mid-step. They weren't loud. They didn't shout, but something about their presence made the air feel heavier. Some wore civilian clothes, some dress uniforms. Most didn't need either. The way they walked told you who they were. It was in their shoulders, in their eyes, in the way they scanned the street out of habit, not nerves. They crossed the sidewalk in silence and stepped through the front door one by one. The chime rang softly as they entered, and even that sound felt different. Not a single word was spoken. They simply spread out in a calm semicircular formation facing the counter. The youngest clerk, seated on a stool behind the register, barely looked up from his phone. "Welcome in, gents. Looking for anything specific today?" he said without much interest. Then he glanced up and froze. 12 men, still quiet, eyes locked on him. The oldest of them, graying hair, square jaw, chest-bearing rows of ribbons, and the unmistakable seal trident, stepped forward. "An hour ago," he said evenly, "one of us walked through this door." His voice wasn't loud, but it hit with force. The second clerk, who had made the joke earlier, cleared his throat, visibly uncomfortable. "Sir, I think there's a misunderstanding." The man cut him off with nothing but a look. "He didn't come here to be honored," the seal continued. "Didn't ask to be recognized. He just wanted to see a rifle he hadn't touched since Vietnam. Your staff laughed, called him Grandpa, told him to leave. You didn't ask who he was. You didn't care." He placed something on the counter. A scorched flag patch, folded and worn. "He pulled this off my uniform when I was bleeding out in Helmont. Carried me out on foot. 22 hours with no radio, no backup, and a hole in his side the size of a fist. He never told anyone about it, never asked for thanks. But when he walked in here today, you treated him like a problem." The younger clerk swallowed hard, shifting in place, eyes flicking toward the door as if hoping to escape. The seal didn't move. "We're not here for revenge. We don't need an apology, but he won't speak for himself, so we're speaking for him." Another seal stepped forward and placed a photo on the glass. 8 men, arms slung over shoulders, dust-caked and sunburned, but smiling. The man in the center, younger then, unmistakable now, was the same one they had mocked an hour ago. The clerk's mouth opened slightly. "I didn't know." The lead seal nodded slowly. "Exactly. You didn't ask. No threats, no demands, just truth." Then the first man turned. The others followed, 12 of them walking out the same way they came in. Without fanfare, without sound, just leaving behind a silence no bullet could replicate. Outside, a small crowd had started to gather, drawn by instinct more than curiosity. Phones came out not to film but to record just in case they forgot how it felt to see something like this. The seals didn't acknowledge them. They didn't need to. They got back in their vehicles and drove off one after another like nothing had happened. But something had, because inside the shop, the air didn't return to normal. The clerk sat down slowly, staring at the photo still sitting in front of him. For the first time, he realized he hadn't just thrown out an old man. He had dismissed history. And now the entire world was about to learn who they'd really pushed out the door. By 1:45 p.m. the photo had already gone viral in 3 veteran Facebook groups. It was taken by a customer who had walked in just after the seals arrived. 12 men standing in complete silence inside the gun shop, all facing the counter where 2 clerks stood frozen behind the register. No fists, no shouting, just stillness and a presence too heavy to ignore. The caption simply read, "When you disrespect a seal, you get all of them." At first, most people didn't understand the context. The post was shared and reshared, often with nothing but the American flag emoji. Then someone asked, who was the old man they were standing for? And that's when everything changed. By 2:12 p.m. a name emerged in the comments. James C. Beckett, a man who had been seen around town for years, but never spoken much. Always polite, always alone, wore the same beat-up SEAL Team 3 cap every day. No one ever asked what it meant until now. One commenter wrote, "He was my uncle's co in '91. Saved 3 men in Panama. Didn't talk about it once after coming home." Another added, "If that's Beckett, we're talking about a real ghost. The kind of guy you only hear about in briefings, never in the news." Someone found a grainy scanned personnel summary buried in a military archive and uploaded it under the photo. Master Chief Special Warfare Operator James Charles Beckett, SEAL Team 3. Joined in 1966. Retired in 2004. Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart. Multiple unlisted nations. Records showing service across Vietnam, Mogadishu, Panama, and Iraq. Over 35 confirmed personnel extractions in hostile zones. No autobiography, no press coverage, no interviews, just decades of silence, decades of doing the job. By 3:00 p.m., the local news station had picked up the story titled simply, "Silent Visit, 12 Navy SEALs Show Up at Gun Store in Support of Local Veteran." The article gave no sensationalist details, just facts. A man had come in. He'd been asked to leave. An hour later, a team arrived, and suddenly, a quiet, overlooked figure had become a symbol of everything people had forgotten to respect. At the shop, the silence hadn't lifted. The clerks hadn't spoken to one another in over an hour. The photograph left behind by the SEALs sat on the counter, showing 8 men in a black and white group photo in the desert. They were muddy, sunburnt, young, but their eyes were hard. Beckett was in the middle, standing with arms crossed and a half-smile that said nothing and everything at once. Customers who came in later didn't ask about ammunition or gear. They asked who the man in the photo was. They asked if he was coming back. One older customer, a Marine from Desert Storm, stood at the counter, stared at the photo for a full minute, then saluted it and walked out without saying a word. By 4:00 p.m., a veteran-owned publication had published a short piece titled, "The Ones Who Stand When You're Gone." It ended with a line that would be quoted thousands of times over the following days. James Beckett didn't need to speak. His silence was covered by 12 voices who chose not to raise theirs either. Back inside the store, the manager arrived pale, holding his phone in one hand, trying to process what had just happened. The photo had been sent to him twice already before he even pulled into the lot. The scorched flag patch that had been left on the counter remained untouched. He didn't blame the clerks. He didn't even speak to them. He simply walked to the display case, took out the M1 Garand the old man had asked to see and placed it on the counter beside the photo. Then he took a sheet of paper, wrote something by hand, and slid it into a clear frame next to the weapon. No fanfare, just a line of text. He carried it once. "We'll carry the memory now." Outside the store, someone had placed a single white flower against the door. Then a challenge coin. Then a folded piece of paper with nothing but the word respect. By nightfall, a small crowd had gathered. Some came to pay respects. Others just wanted to see the place where something real had happened. There were no protests, no chants, no outrage, only quiet. A kind of reverent hush that said more than 1,000 headlines ever could. As for Beckett, he didn't respond to the coverage, didn't post, didn't grant interviews. He wasn't even aware of the online wave building behind him. He went home the same way he'd arrived, unnoticed. But for the first time in years, when someone passed him on the sidewalk, they didn't glance past him. They looked twice. Because now the town knew exactly who they'd asked to leave and who had answered in his place. In the days that followed, something shifted in town. Not dramatically, not publicly, but deeply. The gun shop, once just another business with a cash register and a rack of tactical gear, became something else. It wasn't about weapons anymore. It was about memory. People came not to shop, but to reflect. Veterans walked through the door, not with a list, but with stories. Some left patches from their own units beside Beckett's photo. Others asked quietly, "Is he okay?" No one really knew. The truth was James Beckett hadn't changed his routine. He still walked 2 miles every morning before the sun got too high. Still stopped at the same corner diner for black coffee and no sugar. Still sat alone at the back booth, the one no one ever asked to share. And he never once mentioned the day he was thrown out or the men who showed up behind him. Not to the waitress, not to the cook, not even to the old Marine who sometimes nodded at him across the room. But people noticed anyway. When a local high school invited veterans to speak in history class, Beckett didn't reply. But the week after, the principal received an envelope. Inside was a single handwritten letter describing a rescue op in 1970. No name, no signature, just a map reference and the names of the 6 men saved. It was framed and hung in the school hallway without ceremony. Back at the gun shop, they kept the scorched patch in the display case. The owner, who hadn't been there the day of the incident, had it mounted in glass. Beside it, he added a simple inscription: "For the man we didn't recognize, and the brothers who wouldn't let us forget." The story made its way across veteran forums, then onto talk radio, then quietly into policy meetings no one reported on. Because what happened that day wasn't a protest. It wasn't a fight. It was something rarer. Men standing for one of their own without saying a word. And the message was received. 2 weeks later, the SEAL team returned, but not to the shop. They came to Beckett's diner. They didn't take a table. They didn't make a scene. They just walked in one by one, and stood silently by the booth while he sipped his coffee. He looked up, met their eyes, and for a second no one breathed. Then the youngest among them, the one who hadn't been born when Beckett left the service, spoke. "Sir, if it's all right, we'd like to sit with you." Beckett nodded once. They filled the booth without another word. And for the next hour, no one in the diner heard a single thing. But everyone there remembered the silence because it spoke louder than anything else ever could. Some men don't need a title to be respected. They don't ask for credit. They don't raise their voices. They just do what has to be done and then disappear into silence. Chief James Beckett didn't come to prove anything. He wasn't there to be recognized or thanked or told he mattered. He already knew who he was. What mattered was that his team knew it too. That they hadn't forgotten. That when the world got small and quiet, they showed up. Not with outrage, but with presence. That's loyalty. That's brotherhood. That's the code that doesn't get printed on plaques or shouted in politics. It gets carried quietly, one mission at a time. Most people wouldn't have noticed the man with the limp and the faded cap. But 12 SEALs did, and now so do we. So, I'll ask you, have you ever met someone like Chief Beckett? Someone who served, who never asked for praise, who never told their story, but who changed lives anyway? Write their name in the comments. Tell us how they lived. Say the things they never would because they deserve to be remembered. And if this story touched you, subscribe to The Human Stories. We're here to make sure that men like Beckett are never invisible again. Their silence was earned. Now it's time we speak for them. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you ever see an old man standing quietly in a store, a diner, or a classroom, don't ask him what he's done. Just give him space because he's already done. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.